Welcome to Turn the Page, the official podcast of the Syosset Public Library.
Welcome to Turn the Page podcast. This is Jessikah, and I am here with the author of This is Killing Rain, which is a sequel to Killing Fire.
Yes.
Yes. Actually, A Killing Rain, which is a sequel to A Killing Fire.
Correct, yeah.
And this is the second in what's going to be a 4-book series, correct?
Right, 4-book series based on the elements. So fire was the first one. Water is the second one. Air was going to be the third one, and I'm going to end with soil. And I'm already anticipating the fun I am going to have with earth and soil.
Oh, so exciting! Well, first
Yes.
of all, why don't you actually let the audience know who you are, what your name is, and how you came to this series?
Certainly. So my name is Faye Snowden. I have been writing since my early teens. First started publishing, poems and then short stories and then romantic suspense. And then I took a pause from writing for, I want to say about 8-9 years, almost 10 years. Came back in around 2017 when I finished the first book, A Killing Fire. And it's really strange how I came to write this book. I started thinking about, especially, I had a hard childhood, and I always say my parents were divorced, like most of us have had to be children of divorce. And my mom and dad, it was really acrimonious, and they fought, and they would disparage. My mom especially would disparage my dad to me. And I really favored my dad. I totally looked like him. And I've always wondered when she was, saying her mean things about him, I was like, well, how much is in me? And so, as writers and your imagination starts going on, and I started thinking about, I'm wondering, how a daughter would feel if her dad was really, really bad, right? And then I started wondering, what if he was a serial killer? How would she manage that? And so I kind of wanted to explore that. And that's how Raven came to be and Floyd Burns came to be. And then I just, started the book.
So the first book really lays down the story. That's A Killing Fire, which is Floyd Burns, being Raven's father, who's a serial killer,
right.
Was Floyd Fire Burns. And the first book, Raven is she's working with law enforcement.
Yes.
And
So she's a homicide detective, right?
Yeah.
And in the first book, and she's a daughter of the Floyd Fire Burns, a serial killer. And he's long gone when the book's open. He's been executed in a way. He's gone. So she's having a deal. She's in the first book. She's in Birds Landing, Louisiana, where she grew up. She spent her formative years there, and she is a homicide detective. And she has already, the town is kind of looking at her with a side eye because of what her father did. Yeah.
Yeah, you're a homicide detective, but homicide.
Yeah.
They probably homicide is in her blood is what you probably think. Unfortunately, when you're looking at the child of a serial killer, everybody kind of wonders whether this is you have a predisposition to this type of violence.
Exactly. And it, and the funny part, not the funny part, the ironic part is that Raven, and she's trying to make up for this for all of her life. She and Floyd were very, very close. She was very close to her dad. She still loved her dad. But and for a while they traveled together. After he left his first wife, he took her with him, and they traveled together. And she was actually complicit. Like, for example, when she was a small child, she would kind of lure, she didn't know what she was doing, of course, because she was way too young, but she would kind of lure victims, right? And then, of course, now that she's an adult, she thinks about that. And then she wonders how complicit she was in some of her father's murders. Yeah.
So by the end of A Killing Fire, she left that homicide detective position.
Mm-hmm.
And when we find her now, she's a waitress, but she's still very much in the mindset of what she left behind. And of course, in the mindset of being the daughter of Floyd Burns, she's sort of haunted by her father. Like, she hears his voice,
Yes.
which is very interesting. And she finds that there is another serial killing situation happening, and her nephew is the prime suspect.
And the second one, yeah.
Yeah. So where did you think this journey was going from book one to now? And did Raven's story kind of take you in a different direction?
Yeah, I knew that at the end of the first book, Raven's a character I know for some reason, that character I know well. I knew that she wanted out, right? She wanted out of being a homicide detective, and being a homicide detective in Berg's Landing, Louisiana, it's kind of corrupt, right? The police department is kind of corrupt. So she just wanted out of that. She wanted a normal life, and I didn't see her, especially at the end of the first book, I did not see her just doing what she did at the end of the first book and just going into this waitressing, and then all of a sudden she's all out of it and everything's fine and it's all roses and sunshine. Right. So I just felt that that realistically she would have been pulled back to being a homicide detective and going back. But she has a choice, right? After she goes in, without doing any spoilers, she has a choice to make at the end of that book as well, just as she did the first one. And it's like, which way is she going to go? Is she going to continue on with her life in this different direction, or she's just going to go back to the same old? So, yeah.
When you are sort of you said that the books are going to be based on the elements. Mm-hmm. Fire is the natural beginning, mm-hmm. Obviously because of Floyd Fire Burns. How did you decide it was going to start at fire and end at soil?
Well, it's so funny. I for fire, and it's so weird how when you write, you don't realize how much is your subconscious and how much your experiences from your childhood and all this stuff kind of you're writing about. You dig all that crap up. That stuff does not stay down, right? And it was so funny. I've never been like fascinated by fire. I never really like stood at the stove when you turn on the stove and watch the fire and flame and just kind of stare at it with my head cocked. I didn't do that. But when I was writing this book, that obsession with fire came out. And my sisters read it, and she called me up and she goes, yeah, that was a tough fire. And I'm like, what are you talking about? She said, remember that fire we were in when we were kids? And she reminded me, and I kind of knew about it. But it was stuffed way down, that we were actually in a fire, and she has memories of firemen actually breaking down the walls to get us out because we were stuck in the house with the fire. And so I think that's where a lot of that came up for me. I don't have that. I kind of have that memory after she said it, but I must have blacked it out. But I totally remember the flames, and I remember this tree, and then the yellow flames backlit in this tree is one of the images that I have. But I didn't realize that until she reminded me of that. Yeah, so it's kind of funny. Yeah.
Yeah, that's actually pretty crazy. Like, how could you forget something like that?
Yeah.
But it sort of shows up in the book.
Yeah.
But I mean, I guess water would be a natural secondary element.
Right, right. And then water, yes, would be the net, because water is well, fire can be seen as cleansing too, but if you look at it, like a symbol, water can be cleansing and as well. And yeah. And then soil, though, I just figure, with all the death that surrounds Raven, soil is really the natural end to the book. I can't wait to write that one.
Yeah, that actually makes a lot of sense. And now I'm getting pretty excited about that as well.
Yeah.
So like one of the things I actually wanted to know is, do you kind of see Rachel's the voice of her father? Do you see that as almost like a supernatural element to it, or are we not really supposed to be sure?
I think I would love to turn this series more toward a supernatural bent. But, talking to, my writing partner and everybody, and she's saying, Faye, that's not what people expect. I think we'll never be sure. And I'm not sure either if that would be the right direction for the book. Yeah. So, are you okay?
No, that makes a lot of sense. And I like that. And I think that there is, something to be said for leaving that sort of ambiguous. I think a lot of times when I'm reading a mystery or a thriller, the supernatural aspect of it either works really, really well, or it feels tacked on. And what I like about this is that, and kind of what you were implying is that we might not know. I mean, it really leaves it open to interpretation, much like when you're watching true crime and you have this person claim that they were haunted or something. I mean, in general, you're probably like, yeah, no, this was something else going on. But there is always that question. And I think when, you're not really talking about a serial killer, you're talking about the child of a serial killer who's very much haunted by how much, as you were saying, she feels she might have been complicit, how much she adored her father, how much this all, meant. And then, in the first, like, trying to sort of make her way as a homicide detective and leaving it really does kind of lend itself to thinking, well, is she just haunted? Is this something psychological, or like, is this like a actual haunting? And I love it because it sort of is a really interesting way of pushing a story.
Yeah. And it is interesting to me. And I think that, because I just think we don't know, right? And I was just in the house, and I'm in my detached office right now, and I just went in to get some coffee and before this interview, and I asked the kids, because we have a multi-generational household, and I said, you guys, last night, did you hear someone say, be quiet, around 3:00 in the morning? And all the heads just whipped around. And they looked at me, and then my daughter-in-law's face, it was just got so still and serious. And she goes, no, this house, it's haunted, right? So it's almost like, you just don't know. And I think that, and in some ways, I think that's kind of infuriating but in other ways, and if you're a reader, maybe you want things all nice and in a pretty bow, but in real life, you just don't know.
It's messy, right?
It's messy,
right? And Raven is very messy too. So I like that. So do you have an idea of what's going to happen in the next book?
I do not. I know. I know what I wanted to write it on, but I don't know if that's going to work yet. And I just my just to kind of tell you, I don't know. This may turn out to be another book, but I just am really fascinated about murders that happen out there that don't seem to matter to people, right? Yeah, they just don't.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Right.
and it just like these three men, and that I and one of them I knew growing up were shot execution style in my hometown, and it was not. I just felt like I want to like things. I want to explore things like that anymore, because these things matter, but they don't matter in our press, in our media, even in our, in our conversations with each other, because, people feel some kind of way about the type of person, or maybe they got themselves in that situation.
Oh,
or,
absolutely, 100%. Like, so, like, like, oh, well, she was a sex worker, so,
exactly.
or, racially, I mean, a white woman goes missing and there's news stories all over the place about her, but how many Black women have gone missing and you just don't hear about it?
Yeah.
And it's just so wild. I mean, just thinking about the most recent case was a Gabby Petito, who was it Petito? Yeah, she's from, I think, this area around Syosset. She's not from Syosset, but she's from Long Island, which is actually quite a long island. If you have not been there, it is like 2 hours from front to back. So it's not a misnomer, but it is local. When people think of Long Island, it is local. And you heard about her everywhere.
Yeah, I know.
Like this wasn't just a local case. This wasn't just local girl missing. This was a national story.
Right.
And I certainly felt for the parents. I mean, you can't not, but it was sort of like whispered, with some people, like, this is really terrible. And how many Black women have gone missing too?
Right. And then Indian women. Yeah. And
like, why are we in this situation where we can't make this a national story regardless? Or and again, like another local story, which is somewhat national, is the Gilgo Beach murders. Like, oh, well, they were sex workers. Like, why? Like, okay, well, they were people. They had family who loved them. They didn't want to die. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's what I'm thinking about, kind of running around my head for the second book. Yeah. Or the third book. Whoa.
Right, because this is the second book.
Yeah.
So you've written a whole bunch of other books, and you've written in other genres. What do you like to read?
Oh my goodness. I am such an eclectic reader. I like to read everything. I like biographies, and then I like mysteries, of course, thrillers. I like what they call mainstream or literary fiction. Gosh, all that. I just finished reading I'm going to screw up his name, but The Lincoln Highway, which I thought was so very interesting to me. So I read everything. Yeah. So
how do you craft your characters? I know that you'd mentioned you have some of yourself in Raven. But just in general, when you're approaching characters, do you find that they build themselves organically, or are they all sort of do they come to you as in forms of people that you kind of know, or personality traits?
It is so weird, Jessikah. It is so weird. Floyd Burns came to me whole. He was just like this character that kind of walked in and sat down and said, here I am, do your worst. And then another character that I wrote in my last books, Richard T. Marvel, he also was a character that just started talking to me in my head. This is when I was writing romantic suspense way back. But a Raven, I had to work at her. So that means I had to like interview, and I interview all my characters, interview them. I do like a profile on them. You know, what do they like? What do they hate? What do they hate? What are their pet peeves? What do they like drunk? What do they like sober? What do they like to drink? I like to get to know them. And I try to do that with my main characters, not so much with my secondary characters. They kind of grow organically, but I try to treat them as full human beings. Yeah. So Annie Lamott had a really good thing about tending the garden. To use the metaphor of, you know, pretend that your characters have a garden. You know, what do they plant in that garden? What do they tend? What do they neglect? You know, what do they care about in that? I try to use that a lot too. Yeah.
So my last question is, would you like to see this developed into some sort of maybe like series, like a television?
Oh my gosh, that would be my wish. My son asked me that all the time. It was like, Mom, if someone did a series or a film on this, who would play Raven, and would you like that?
Now that's what I want to know. There you go.
Okay, you ever watch Big Sky?
Yeah.
The woman, and I can't think of the character name, which is awful, but I think that the woman who plays one of the detectives or one of the private investigators, the Black woman there, I think she would be an awesome Raven. What is her name? Gosh, I want to go look it up.
I'm looking it up right now.
I just love her look. I love how she walks and how she plays that part.
Cassie, Kylie Bunbury?
Yes.
Okay. Yes.
Yeah, and I think she's just so beautiful. I think she would be an awesome Raven.
I agree. Well, this book has gotten such good press. And I lied. My last question, or the last thing I wanted to ask you about a little bit, is the publisher you went with. Could you talk a little bit about them?
Yes, Flame Tree is a small publisher out of the UK. And I have been with large publishers. I published my first book with Kensington. And what I love about Flame Tree is that they pay attention to their authors. And my editor, Don, he knows how to edit my books without making me feel like this, like a tiny little, woman. I mean, like a grade school student or something like that. He doesn't make me feel. He does a great job in editing. You get a lot of personal attention there, and they publish primarily horror, but they were branching out when I signed with them. I think in 2018. Yeah, so I really like them. I really like working with them.
Yeah, I've been seeing a lot of things from them lately, and I'm finding just all of these smaller publishers sort of sprouting up, and I love it.
And they have a big distribution. I think their Simon & Schuster distributes their work, so you can get their books anywhere. So yeah.
Well, if that isn't a hint, I don't know what is. You can get A Killing Rain and A Killing Fire anywhere. When is this book due out? It's due out, I believe, the end of June.
June 21st, 2022.
All right, so get ready for A Killing Rain, sequel to A Killing Fire, the next in the Raven Burn series, and I'm looking forward to. Wait, so the last one is A Killing Soil. Do we know what the Air one is going to be called?
No, that's gonna be interesting because so I have boys, and my boys, from the time they were 2 years old, you say fart and they fall out and roll on the floor. I don't know. I didn't understand. I still don't understand. And now they're almost 30 and it's the same way. And then I was like, okay, a killing wind, and they fell out. And I said, it can't be a killing wind.
No.
So I don't know. Jessica, you may have to help me. I don't know what I'm going to call it. Killing air is not even a killing.
Yeah, I'm sure that it's out there, but man, Faye, your sons, I mean, but you nailed it. It never, it's one of those things.
It can't be. So it may have to be a little bit different. I loved what another thing I like about Flame Tree is I don't know who does their covers, but when they send me their covers, they say, how do you like that? I'm saying, I just can't. They're amazing. I just love the 2 covers for these. I don't know who they got to do those covers, but they're
really good. I think that just the art of book covers has really upped its game in like the last decade, especially. We all kind of got tired of hearing, oh, you don't judge a book by its cover. Well, that's not true. Totally do.
Yeah.
But
what I like that they did, they put a Ravensburn's tail on this one.
Yes.
So I think I can have a little bit of leeway with the titles because they'll just put the Ravenburn's tails. And if it's not a Killing Wind, maybe it can't be a Killing Wind, but it'll be something. And they'll know they'll know that it's in the series, right? Yeah.
Have a wonderful, wonderful rest of your day. Thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, you are so welcome. And thank you for having me. This means so much.
Oh, no problem.
Reading the books too. Yeah.
It's great. I think it's going to be, again, this one's going to be a hit. Like the first one, a lot of people really loved it. This one you're going to love. And we're looking forward to seeing where Raven's path takes her.
Oh, okay, great. Thank you. Thank you.
Once again, this was Jessikah with Syosset Library. Our guest today was
Faye Snowden.
And we are going to close this chapter of Turn the Page.
It's time to close this chapter of Turn the Page. Join us for the next episode.